Hello everybody and welcome to the stream. Today is Wednesday, May 19th, 2021, and it is another episode of the C+ Podcast. Today is, I believe today is actually the 15th episode, I'm pretty sure. Once again though, I am your host Hex and Shin, and I am joined by my co-host Hex Ginkgo.
Hi everybody.
So today we're going to be playing some Final Fantasy 14, going to be having a good time in that, doing, re-clear stuff, classic things, staying with song and dance. But, so, Hex, there's something that I want to talk to you about, and it's kind of like a conversation. It's mostly just me ranting, to be completely honest with you. But, so, there is a...
oh, God.
You okay?
Sorry, I just saw a Lalafell, and their name is Ouija Squeegee.
Oh, okay, cool. But so there's a streamer that I follow, and her name is RPG Bree.
Okay.
And the way that I found her was I saw her on YouTube because she started posting her playthrough of Final Fantasy 14 actually. And I was like, "Oh, cool. I wanted to watch her reactions. I wanted to see what she was doing." And I want to say 1 or 2 weeks ago, she actually hit partner.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's really, really cool. Like, I'm super happy for her. That's really awesome. But at the same time, I was like, she's only been streaming for about a year and a half now. And part of me was like, man, that's really awesome. That's really cool. But another part of me was like, man, I've been doing this for almost 5 years now. Where's my partner? And it really was just kind of like part of me was like, one part of me, again, very happy for her. She's put in the work. It's really awesome. But another part of me couldn't help but feel, just jealous of
Totally.
Just her success and stuff like that. And so I wanted to talk about, at what point, or not at what point, I wanted to talk about what she's doing, is it that's normal, right? Like, that's normal for me to feel that way, right? Like,
I mean,
I feel like
it's
obviously it's not a good thing to feel that way. Like, there's no reason for me to feel jealous.
Well, it's not that you're like, this person doesn't deserve it. It's like, it's that you work hard for what you do.
Yeah.
And you want to feel, you want to see some more return on your
return on investment.
Your time investment.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's understandable. Like, in all honesty, I had friends who my situation was similar, where I would have friends who were like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna start streaming on Twitch," and I had been doing it, granted, inconsistently for a while, but I had been doing it for a considerable amount of time. And they're like, I'm gonna get affiliate, and they got it like in 2 months. And I had been actually really trying hard for like 6 months or something, and it was still that, like, I helped you do half the stuff that you know how to do. And it was that, for me, was kind of a slap in the face.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like their fault. I don't market myself. I'm not that kind of person, but you very much are, or at least to a much, much bigger degree than I am. So I understand your feelings in that. I don't blame you at all.
Yeah.
But
and
that it also just is about, like, there is a huge luck factor to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like, a part of me was like, as I was like, I remember just feeling just like angry and like jealous, but at the same time I was like, there's no reason to feel this way, because it's not helpful. Like, it's just not.
No, it just makes you feel.
Yeah,
shitty.
It just makes you
like
feel
it makes
worse.
you feel bad because you're upset, and then it makes you feel bad if you're, a halfway decent person, because you're like, man,
decent.
I should probably not feel this way about something so pretty trivial.
Yeah, and granted, and again, like, their success doesn't impact me in any way. It really doesn't.
No.
And like, and I don't want to. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, like, I can't believe another woman fucking flashing her tits to stealing my views. No, one, she's not doing that, and then two, it's like it doesn't matter. But that being said, is I do want to talk about there's been, well, I don't know about lately, but for a little while now, there has been a bit of a controversy with some streamers, having what people would call hot tub streams.
Oh, yeah, you're talking specifically about Amaranth. My buddy actually just stumbled on that because he wanted to watch some tournaments, and he's like, what the fuck is a hot tub stream? And I'm like, oh, it's Amaranth. Yeah, she pretty much has a free pass to do anything.
Yeah. But
he's like, are you serious? And I'm
yeah.
like, yeah, she's flashed her vagina and her boobs on stream before.
Yeah, but so...
And, like...
But
yeah,
I do want to talk about kind of the, like, that argument of streams like that taking away from views, as well as the argument of specifically female streamers stealing views, in which my stance on it is that's a stupid argument. That's where I'm at.
That's literally what I was gonna say. Like, anybody who's like upset, oh man, those are views that I could be having, and it's like, well, you're not, and because most of the people that are going specifically for that are not gonna come watch you play Minecraft.
Yeah, exactly. And like,
yeah,
and I'll admit that there was a part of my lizard brain that was like, when like I would feel jealous of Bree's success, because obviously, again, it's not fair to put in all this work, put in all this effort, and yet still see someone do the exact same stuff or similar stuff at the very least and do it better than you. That doesn't feel good.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, for sure. I had that in baseball and tennis all the time. I'm just like, man, I'm putting in so much work. All I want to do is get better, and there's just some people who are more successful than you, that are better than you, and it doesn't mean that you're doing a bad job. It just means that some people are luckier or more talented, or are actually putting in more effort. Yeah, like, you don't know from their perspective what they're doing either.
Right. Yeah, and also, like, again, my part of my lizard brain, I did have that same argument though, that I'm like, oh, it's just because she's a woman that, that's one of the factors as to why she's more successful. I'm like, no, that's not necessarily it, to be completely honest. Like,
it's not necessarily it.
Sure, it potentially could be a factor. Yes, sure. It's not, but that's not like just because she's a girl does not necessarily mean that she's gonna get a lot of views. That's not that for sure. No.
I know plenty of female streamers that don't get a ton of views.
Yeah.
There's a girl that I watch. I don't remember. She's changed her name a bunch on Twitch. She used to go by Powpoo, and then it was Ames. Anyway, she used to speedrun Kingdom Hearts, and then she switched over to 64. And granted, she averages probably, from what I've seen, about 20 to 30 views. When I started watching her, it was like 15. She might pull like 50 now. So it is a steady like increase, but it is a slow, steady increase.
Right, yeah.
Like, but she is putting in the work, and she does try really hard, and is something to say that just because you're a female does not immediately mean that you're going to make partner in a year, because I've been watching her for probably 2 or 3 years now. I mean, and yeah, it's just like, it's not going to come to everybody.
Yeah.
It's all about what you give your viewer base.
Yeah.
Is the biggest thing.
Yeah. And I will admit that, like, again, I've been doing this for 5 years, and for almost 5 years now, and it is, I would be lying if I didn't say, or I'd be lying if I said that there hasn't been a single time since I thought about quitting. I'd be lying if I said that. I'm like, oh no, I've never thought about stopping. I've definitely never thought about doing that. But I have, and I will admit that, like, lately, the question of do I stop, or at what point do I call it quits? That question, ouch, I will admit, has gotten bigger, and like there's been points where I'm just kind of like sitting here that I'm like, is it worth it to keep going? and a part of me is kind of like, well, of course it is. Of course it's like it's worth it to keep going. Of course it's like, because this is something that I enjoy doing. That I wake up every day and I'm like, oh, I don't actually hate my life.
Right.
But at the same time, it is frustrating to kind of have that mentality of, and I'll admit that there are points where, you know, people will ask me, oh, you know, what are you doing, or how's streaming going, and it is unfortunate for me to be like, I'm still embarrassed to say that I stream, because, you know, I'm at the point where I'm like, I want this to be something that I'm proud of, but at the same time, a real career, yeah. But I'm still not there yet, and it is. Yeah. I was actually thinking about this yesterday, that I'm like, you know, it's fine to take these baby steps, and, you know, eventually every day I'm getting there. You know, it's small progress, but at least it's something. But at the same time, it dawned on me yesterday that I'm like, you know, that's nice and all, but when am I actually gonna get like real progress? Like, you know, baby steps are fine, but at some point I have to start walking. You know, I have to start doing, there has to be more momentum than what I'm actually doing right now. And it kind of dawned on me last night that I'm just like, when is that gonna happen? And unfortunately, my answer to myself was like, I don't know. Right. And that's the thing that I think scared me the most, or is like, I just don't know when that's gonna happen. And I knew, and like, obviously when I first started, of course I knew that, like, I told myself, like, this may not work, or at the very least, if we're gonna make this work, it's gonna take a really long time, and I had to be okay with that. A long time. And like, and I made my peace with it, and I told myself, I'm like, yep, I get it. I'm in it for the long haul, and thankfully I'm in a situation where I'm allowed to do this kind of stuff. But last night I was just like, I need to do something. I just, like, sitting here waiting for something to happen is not gonna work, and I'm at this point now where I'm just like, I need something else to do. So that way, to help in this grand scheme of, like, everything that I've built so far is good, but I need to do something else now. I need to do more things, because I think I'm in a comfortable enough position where I can start to branch out more. And now that's like the new question that I have of, like, what can I do now that will still help? And that's, I think, where I'm stuck right now.
Right. Well, for me, I was in a position where I met you through just finding you randomly on Twitch, because I was looking for people who are playing Kingdom Hearts. And since then, you and I have become friends, and like, it was really interesting seeing your progression. Personally, especially as somebody who is a smaller streamer who has basically no following, and I don't mean that in any sort of offense to my own viewers that do show up, but, you know, I average 1.2 viewers.
Right, yeah.
And I absolutely 100% appreciate anybody who is willing to take time out of their day just to come watch me yell at a video game. Right, because that's 90% of what I do anyway. But I will also admit that there was definitely a point where I was like, man, like, I try just as hard as Maxwell. Like, why am I not getting affiliate as fast as he was? And it's like, I bugged all of my friends. I did all of this stuff, and I promoted on Facebook, I promoted on Instagram, which are all things that I do not like doing. I don't like doing that, and it's partially a lazy thing, and it's like, I want to get there on my own, but it's like, you don't get there without having to do that, because this is the digital age, it's the world we live in, you have to market yourself, you have to be well, you have to be marketable, for one thing.
Yeah, you have to make noise in order to be heard.
Yeah. And that was just never something I wanted to do. And you are also in a different position than I am, and you have the luxury of being able to do this every day.
Yeah.
Like every day that you feel comfortable doing it.
Right, yeah.
And me,
You work.
I have a full-time job that I have to be at 5 days a week, and I have a relationship, I have cats, and I know so many people, so many streamers that have all of those things and are able to balance that. But me personally, I'm not.
Yeah.
And I used to be really upset about that. Like I held animosity towards myself, towards my job, towards my cats, towards my girlfriend for a little bit. Like, because I wasn't doing the thing that I wanted to do because I wasn't able to balance it. And it got to a point where I had to accept that, yeah, I'm not going to be able to do this, at least not right now. So I will take what I can. I will stream as many days a week as I can. I will try and get myself out there a little bit more by playing with you. And like it, because playing games with you, I am facing the right way, right?
Yes.
Okay. I know has helped me gain a little bit more of a viewership. And while I did it for completely altruistic purposes, like I really enjoy playing games with you. It was just it was a mutually beneficial relationship for the both of us.
Yeah.
And has helped us. So like I 100% understand the frustration and the jealousy aspect, because when you got it, I was like, fuck man, like that's all I want, this is all I need. And it would feel so so relieving after all of the time and money that I invested. Because for me, I bought a lot of my streaming equipment back in like 2012, and I didn't really start streaming until a couple years ago. And that it felt like such a waste. Like there was all this weight hanging on my shoulders.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that is the same thing for you, because I know a lot of the equipment that you have purchased for yourself. We've talked about it, and I've helped you find some stuff, and vice versa. And it's not an insignificant number at all.
Oh yeah.
And like while being affiliate is its own achievement, like yeah, there is definitely
you want more. You always want more. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it is something that's like sometimes you see the climb that you have to do, and I think it is a
freaking mountain.
Yeah, it's sometimes you just don't realize, or you come to realize of like, oh, this is a lot higher than I thought it was.
For sure. Sure.
Yeah, and like I'm not gonna sit here and say, oh, woe is me, I'm this special snowflake. My troubles are much more different and special than someone else. No, because I think this is something that everybody feels in this sort of line, right, as well. And I think it's something that I feel it's something that people just don't talk about enough. And
no, I people are so averse to saying, hey, I'm jealous.
Yeah, and I think that I agree, and I think like most people are gonna like.
But that's such a human emotion.
And like being jealous, it's okay to feel that way. But I think what matters more importantly is how you what you do about it. Is like, how do you turn that jealousy into something more constructive? That's it. Like, is making it constructive, not letting it break you down, and not turning you into a person who goes and attacks the person that you are jealous of. Yeah. And that is extremely unhealthy. Yeah, and I think that's what sets apart people I think that's what sets real content creators apart from just, the average ones, I guess I'll say. Because I think it's
until you get to YouTube.
YouTube's a very different, very
such
different
a toxic
it's a very different situation.
I love YouTube, but oh my god, like the people at the top, like the very top, talking like, especially in the beauty community, which I have learned a lot about through Emily, it is like they hate each other.
Cutthroat.
It's so awful.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
and for the
wild.
most part, like people like Markiplier, people like Felix, the Game Grumps, Sean for Jacksepticeye, like they're all, for the most part, as far as I know, like close friends. They do stuff together all the time. But like you get into different communities where they're like, yeah, let's collab, and it's like, I'm doing this only for my personal benefit.
Yeah, for the sole benefit of myself. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is just such a different environment. And I know that stuff like that does go on here. Like, they're you know, like streamer houses, and like, I'm gonna make money off of your content, and like that stuff sucks. But
as
long as you are self-aware.
Yeah, there are situations though where there is a symbiotic dynamic though. Like there are a myriad examples of stuff like that where it's like we are all making content, but we are trying to produce content in a way that is beneficial for all of us.
Right. 100%. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. Like, I don't think anybody, or not anybody, but anybody who is doing a collab or like doing a cooperative stream like with a friend, it's like, this isn't just for me, and it isn't just for you. This is to help both of us, and like that's really big. Yeah. It's you can't do it with just one person. One person can't take all the weight, or at least shouldn't, because then your quality dips, and then that reflects poorly on you. You know, like there's a level that you both have to aspire to. Especially if you are not connecting on that level, then, yeah, like I said, the quality dips, and people will notice. And that carries over into regular streaming as well, because if you start to become fatigued and you get to that, like, man, I really don't know if I want to do that thing anymore. Like, eventually your attitude and your feelings will eke out into... your persona that you like field.
Yeah, I mean,
for your stream.
It'll seep into just the stuff that into your content that you make.
Yeah, and you'll just have animosity for something that you really wanted to enjoy. Yeah. And that's also really important. Is like, yeah, you don't always have to love what you do, but find new ways to enjoy it. Yeah. And like or ways to reinvigorate that self, or reinvent your brand altogether. Like sometimes, like, I know that's really hard for certain people. Yeah. I mean, companies in general try to do it all the time, and like
to varying
International
degrees
House of
success.
Burgers didn't exactly work. But there are a lot of ways that people can go about like fixing their own self-doubt. It's just, it really comes down to a self-evaluation that not a lot of people want to do. And the fact that you were able to, one, not only like admit that to yourself, but say it out loud says a lot. Like, a lot of people, like I said, are not willing to admit that they're jealous because for some reason that makes them feel like they're a shitty person. It's like, no, literally everybody on the planet feels jealousy. Everybody on the planet wants to be better than the other guy. And it's not because they want to be better than somebody else. It's that they just want more for themselves. Like they want what they feel they're due. And hopefully that isn't like met or perceived by them in a bad way. Yeah. Like, yeah. I understand completely, but I have also, I'm not in a position where I can do this every day as much as I want to. Right, yeah. I absolutely would if I could, but at the same time, I get burnt out. I really do. I have an issue sitting and just talking for hours and hours and hours. One thing that I've definitely noticed about myself and streaming is that, or at least just playing games, is I'm very quiet. And while I have worked really hard to learn to be more animated, and not to like an over-the-top degree, but just to keep talking, to keep trying to remind myself that even if there's only one person there, that you're speaking to a large audience, because hopefully one day you will be there. And like that's one thing that's really important. Making sure that you connect with your viewer base is really important, and maintaining those like relationships, if you really do connect with some people, is really cool. Like your interactivity with people is really good. And it's one of the things that like I have noticed among bigger streamers is that once you hit a certain point, it's really hard to interact with a certain not demographic, but a certain percentage of your people, because a lot of the streamers that I watch that are much bigger is like, you will get incredibly lucky to get one message that like they will see. And
I mean, but unfortunately that's the trade-off.
Yeah,
like that's absolutely. Unfortunately the trade-off that kind of happens.
And for me, like, I like interactivity. I like talking to people. And if the trade-off is I'm never going to talk to people except for those that I really, really know or I really, really want to talk to, that almost doesn't seem worth it, because the whole point of this is entertaining people. And at least the way that I perceive it is like connecting with people. It's not just like, I'm going to play video games and you're going to watch me. It's like, I'm going to play video games and I want to talk about what's going on.
Yeah.
You know, and that's nothing against anybody who is like in the upper echelon of people who don't have to worry about that, who can just play a game or have a hot tub stream and they will just generate revenue out the ass. Yeah. Like, it's impressive, but that's not the kind of thing that I am effectively going for. But, you know, like, that is the basically epitome of the mark that people want to hit.
Yeah.
You know? Right,
yeah.
So I have personally had to kind of rein my own expectations in through my own limitations and what I want streaming to be for me. And I think that's something that people don't think about, is like, yeah, I want to be a big streamer. It's like, yeah, but what does that mean to you? What do you want for yourself? Like, and don't just say money. Like, what does streaming mean for you?
Yeah.
What does
and I think that's
do
definitely
this for entertainment?
Yeah. I think that's definitely like, again, that's one of those questions that I think people who are very serious about streaming as a career, like, that is a question that, again, separates people that just do it kind of as like a hobby or like aren't very serious about it, to people who are like, yes, this is going to be a career for myself. Totally.
Like, I tried to do that with YouTube, and like, I knew what I wanted from YouTube. And I knew what it was gonna take, but it was really YouTube itself that kind of made that impossible. Mm-hmm. Because making it on YouTube now is incredibly hard. It's not impossible. There are people out there that, you know,
it's doable. It's for sure doable, but the bar to get there just keeps getting raised.
Especially because of their policies and like it's very not friendly.
It's because of the landscape. It's always changing. There's no unfortunately, it's like you can't be comfortable for too long is the thing.
No.
And I think that is kind of that's the difficulty for, I think, even with streaming, is that like I think you always constantly have to be doing something, and doing the same thing over and over is good, but that momentum won't last forever, and you're constantly having to adapt, and you're constantly having to think of new ideas and figure out what's popular, and think about, you know, a myriad of different things, and in which and again, and I the way that I always describe streaming, especially in a career sense, is you're mining for gold in a mine shaft that has already been excavated.
Oh yeah.
And you're just hoping that there's something left behind.
Yeah, just scraps. Well, so one thing that my dad always impressed upon me when I was younger was like goal setting. And when I was a kid, I was like, oh yeah, whatever. I don't understand what that means, old man. But like it is something that I have learned to start to do, is like in terms of streaming, it like when somebody's like, yeah, I want to set a goal, and my goal is to have 5 viewers on average per, every time I stream. And like, one, if you're just starting out, that is incredibly unrealistic.
Oh yeah.
Setting viewer goals is really, it's not healthy. It's not the worst thing, but you are more than likely going to be very demoralized very quickly, because unless again you just get crazy lucky, it's unlikely. So setting like personal goals of like, I'm going to get through this game by this date, and hopefully this amount of people will follow, like that should always be a secondary thing. And like becoming affiliate or becoming partner, I think should always be in the back of somebody's head and not at the forefront, because it becomes like a weight that hangs over your head. And that's never
I think it's also
fun.
and I think that's also, it ties into the fact that conversation of what are you doing this for? Like, sure, the end goal, because I want to be affiliate, I want to be partner. Sure, awesome. But if that's really your only goal, it makes it a lot more difficult, because then it's like, well, what are you going to do for content? How are you, like, you're really not asking the right questions.
No. Like for you and me.
Yeah, and I completely understand that, like, figuring out what those questions are is so difficult. Like, it's so difficult to like, it's easy to say, oh, you're not asking the right questions, but it's really easy to say that, because it's so hard to be like, well, what are the right questions? What are the questions that I need to be asking? And you ask anybody, and it's like, you ask anybody, and they'll say, oh, well, you need to be doing this, or you need to be doing this. And it's like, sure, that's correct, but at the same time, it's also wrong, because there are so many other factors that contribute to an individual identity. We're not, like, your life is different than my life. So, I mean, I can tell you the stuff that's worked for me, but at the same time, that may not work out for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was something that I was just going to mention, is like yours and my position with the games that we stream, in being like variety not podcasters, variety streamers.
I mean, this is a variety podcast, so
yes, this is. I like, it clicks in my head because you say it just about every time. Is like that is a challenge in and of itself. Like, because people who are dedicated to one game or one type of game, it's easier for certain types of people to, like, fans is what I mean. To, like, if you're a fan who only likes fighting games, and you find one guy who, like, all he does is play fighting games, you're gonna gravitate towards that guy more than some dude who just played it one time and you were like, oh, this is cool.
Right.
Because that other person will fill your need more consistently.
Yeah.
And like, being a variety streamer, you cater to a whole lot of different things.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. Like, you would hope that that would mean that your viewer base would be wider.
Yeah,
but that's not always how it works.
And it is like, I mean, those are the risks that you play into.
Oh God.
Like, each thing has playing to only one game. Sure, like, that could be very well a good idea, but again, it does have different risks, because you're only catering to one aspect of a whole wide range of audiences. Same as doing variety stuff. Sure, you theoretically have more people to have for an audience, but it's more of a jack of all trades but a master of none sort of deal, where you're kind of, variety is really just like the Swiss Army knife, where it's like you play a lot of games but at like a subpar level.
Yeah, exactly. That was another point, that it's like, if you're a variety streamer, like, hopefully you're really good, because that also is something that people take into account when, like, if you just wanted to do Destiny occasionally, well, one, you're not going to beat out the Destiny guys who do it every day, and two, if you are not like god tier or entertaining, then people are not going to have a reason to come see you. Right, and that's like not an offensive thing. Like,
it's really just it's just one of those hard truths.
Fact. Yeah,
like it's a
like,
hard
no one
truth
wants
that,
to hear it.
Yeah, unfortunately, that you don't want to hear, but it's like you have to know that this is what's happening. Because if you don't pay attention to this sort of stuff, then you're not. It's just not going to work.
There's also the risk of burnout. Like, playing the same game is not the most fun thing in the world. Like, if you set yourself on the path of like playing JRPGs, like, you should have an idea of what that entails.
Yeah.
But like, if you like people who do play the same game every day, like who speedrun the same game all the time, I even get to the point where, and I wanted to speedrun Kingdom Hearts 2. I learned a lot of stuff. I got to the point where I'm like, I can't fucking play Kingdom Hearts 2 anymore, man.
Yeah.
Like, this is my favorite game of all time, and I just can't do it because I'm starting to hate it. Like, I applaud people who are able to do that, but I'm not that kind of person. I can play Final Fantasy every day of the week, but I can't play it as the only thing that I do every week.
Right, yeah.
You know? And that's something that comes into the, like, what do you want this to be for you? Do you want this to be like, I'm only going to play this? Or do you want to, you know, be able to play what you enjoy? Because that is huge. You have to be able to enjoy what you're doing, because if you don't, people are going to notice.
Yeah, at least you have to be able to enjoy it at least 85% of the time.
Sure.
Like, it doesn't have to be 100%.
Granted, I get mad at this game,
yeah,
but like,
but a decent amount, and be like, you know what? Yeah, this is cool.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Give me the 2B minion.
But so
70.
Speaking of, so moving on from it, rather than beat this dead horse, moving on to something else. Speaking of Final Fantasy, so FanFest, or Final Fantasy 14 specifically, just came out, or just happened this past weekend. It was super awesome, super fun. Was it just this past weekend?
Yes.
Yes, it was. My days are starting to blend together again.
2B minion.
But
please.
So, you wanted to talk about Final Fantasy stuff.
Did I get it?
But I also want to talk about Final Fantasy stuff. And so I thought it might be a good idea to talk about at least. So the new expansion is going to come out in November, and without getting into major spoilers for people who haven't played yet or are still going through the story, I want to briefly talk about some of our favorite moments playing this game. Either stuff that we've done together, independently, stuff in the story, what have you. So I'll go first and say that one of my favorite memories that I've had in this game, in Final Fantasy 14, was
somebody rolled 3 higher than me. Are you kidding? Sorry. I rolled a 70. They got a 73.
Feels
son of a bitch.
Bad.
This is my least favorite moment of all time.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. But one of my favorite things in this game that I've done is, I remember I was doing it was Leviathan Extreme, which is a ARR trial. But I remember this was like way back when I first started playing, and I remember I queued up for it. It was me and 7 other people, and I remember we pulled once, and immediately we just wiped, and we reset. And I remember one of our tanks left, and so we're all sitting around waiting for Q to fill in our missing tank, and I remember just being like, do you guys just want to like run the fight? Just see how far we get, but at the same time, like, it's at least we're learning stuff. Like, I'd rather I'd rather keep dying, but at least like start to learn things. And everyone was like, yeah, sure, you know, it's a better use of our time rather than just sitting around. And I remember, so like it was the 7 of us. We, you know, it was just attempt after attempt after attempt to a point where, you know, we were getting like 80%, then 75, then 60, then 50. And I remember the last attempt we got 25%, and we're like, oh, we might actually be able to clear this. Like, it might actually be doable now. And I remember, so each trial has a time limit to it. I think the time limit's like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. But I remember, we got we wiped again. The boss was at like 25% health, and we're like, this might actually be doable. We might actually be able to do this. And we're like, okay, you know, we are near the end of the fight. We'll give it one more shot, and we're still waiting for our fill, by the way. And we're like, okay, let's do this. We're gonna try it. We're gonna see what happens, and we're gonna hope for the best. And I remember we're going to the fight. We get the bosses, I want to say at like 20% health at this point. And we finally get a second tank. And I remember they popped in. They're like, hey, what's up? And we're like, cool, awesome, you're here. You need a tank right now. Like, you're hitting the ground running right now. And so, like, they joined in. We're fighting. The boss gets to, I want to say the boss is at like 3%. And I'm like, we're going to do it. We're going to get there. And I look at our timer, and we've got like 60 seconds left. And I'm like, oh, we're racing now.
We need to do this.
Like, we need to go. And I will never forget this. I remember clear as day, like 60 seconds on the clock, we all just start dying. Like, people just start dying left and right. And I remember it was me and another tank. And I'm just like, I have to LB right now. And it was literally like you're watching a basketball game or any sort of event where it's just a buzzer beater. And you're hoping that you're going to get there. And I remember that this was one of those few moments where we cleared, and I remember actually jumping out of my chair and just screaming at the top of my lungs, just being, yes, we did it! And I was just like, I never, like, it was like the purest form of gamer euphoria that you would ever experience in your life. And for me, that was probably the most, like, that was, I think, for me, like, the moment I'm like, I'm gonna be playing this game until I die. Like, 100%. I'm not, there's no way that I can play anything else at this point.
Man, I have some really good memories. Most of mine are story based.
I mean, that's fine. I will admit that I think Final Fantasy XIV is probably one of the few games that I have played that have actually made me cry.
Oh yeah.
Like,
for sure.
I will freely admit
this game has done it
has brought me to
several
tears
times.
multiple times.
Well, for me, like, two specific things come to mind. And one is the Orchefant incident.
God, it's so funny.
It's so good.
That's probably one of my favorite moments that for us playing together has been.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know, Orchefant is a character in this game. Spoiler alert, he dies. Spoiler alert. But it's a very, like, it's a real tug at your heartstrings moment because he sacrifices himself for you. And I remember Hex and I are playing, and he's going through the story, and so I'm accompanying him. And I remember it's getting close to the part where where Orchefant dies. And I remember we're talking, and Hex goes, you know, unpopular opinion, but I don't really like Orchefant. And I go, oh, really now? And then, like, a couple seconds later, I just hear Hex go, oh, is he gonna die? And I'm just sitting in my chair with, like, silent glee of, like, oh god, it's gonna happen.
And the whole reason, like, Grant, I have gotten so much flack for this from all of my friends.
Those are heathen words.
It is well deserved, but there is a reason that I feel that way. because I do not have the connection that a lot of people do.
You don't know.
Because yeah, I did not do the A Realm Reborn.
Yeah, you didn't play A Realm Reborn. You didn't.
Well, I didn't do A Realm Reborn almost at all, let alone the patch quests. And that is where you were introduced to him.
Yeah.
That is where you get like a real attachment to him. Like you have an understanding of like why he cares about you and why you should care about him.
And why he's like the best.
I didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
So like not that my opinion is good, but I hope that it is at least understandable, and while not justified,
it's understandable that you're wrong.
Yeah, I admit that I'm wrong, but at this point I have to stick to my guns.
you have to stay with it.
Yeah, I have to stand by my shitty opinion, and I'm okay with that. The other really big moment for me, and I'm like, I don't know how many people don't feel this way, is during the end of the is it the Shadowbringers story, or is it a patch quest?
It's the story.
Okay, it's like the last fight that you have to do. It is incredibly emotional. I definitely cried there because there's a character that you develop a relationship with throughout the course of Shadowbringers, and as well you meet them earlier on, but it all culminates into the end of the the end of that storyline, and he basically
it's a touching moment. Like without
it's
getting
incredibly
into,
touching.
Yeah, without getting into too much detail to try to save from spoilers and stuff like that. It is a very basically emotionally powerful moment.
This person that you have gained like a lot of respect for, and you have an understanding of like their motivations and why they did some of the things that they did, has this whole passing of the torch moment with you, and that moment is very special. Yeah. As well as how like the music kicks up in the moment it does. It's like it's all perfectly timed.
It's all so well done, coordinated and well orchestrated that it is an unbelievable. It's a very great experience.
It's so gratifying.
Yeah, I will admit that I didn't cry in that moment, because I was too hyped up for the moment, because like everything started happening, and instead of feeling like, oh god, it's so beautiful, I was like, let's fucking go. Like I was ready to just rage, and I was like, yes, this is the moment. I will admit though that for patch 5.3, I will admit that 5.3, the patch for 5.3 is, I would say
that one got you.
Yeah, there was a moment that got me, and you can even see it on stream, in which all I can describe it is it's a boy and his dog, and I remember playing through it, and I remember I made a comment on stream that I was like, I'm upset that this is the part that's making me cry. That like
I'm trying to remember.
Everything else I was super okay with. I got like misty-eyed at the most, where most people would like be bawling their eyes out. I was like, you know what? It really pulls, but I'm not there yet. And then eventually I was like, God damn it, I can't stop sobbing. And I'm angry that I can't stop crying now. But it's without revealing too much, dog is reunited with his owner for a brief moment.
That was in 5.3.
That was in 5.3. Yeah, it was your victory lap basically.
That was the Amaro thing?
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. For some reason, I thought that was in the regular MSQ.
No, that was 5.3.
Okay. Yeah. So that one was incredibly.
Yeah, it's just like it's super heartwarming and wholesome. Yeah,
that one
like,
got me too.
Ooh, it hurts. It hurts so good.
Man, I was like, this. I have this one down. I know all the mechanics. I forgot about that mechanic.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I will say that, as we get into as we get into, Endwalker ending and stuff like that, I will say that for Shadowbringers itself, Shadowbringers has been an amazing expansion.
Oh yeah.
Like,
still not my favorite.
Which one's your favorite? Heavensward?
Heavensward.
It's fair enough.
And that's not me ragging on Shadowbringer at all.
Yeah, no, and that's fine. Like, I honestly
good.
like there are plenty of people who would say that Heavensward is their favorite expansion for sure. I'm not one of those people.
I'm a dragon sellout kind of person. You throw dragons at me, and I'm like, fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah, dragons are cool.
Dragons
for
are
me.
shit.
While Shadowbringers probably isn't my favorite, I will say that it's the best. For so far, like
it probably is the best. I'll
say that Shadowbringers is the best expansion, but for me, my favorite is Stormblood. And I think it's partly because I started playing when Stormblood actually released. But at the same time, I liked Stormblood because it tackled a lot of issues that I think a lot of games are like kind of afraid to address. Because like with Storm,
abuse and
abuse, war,
politics,
that kind of stuff. Like, it's a lot of stuff that is, that can come across as boring, but it does it in a way that is interesting enough to keep you, invested in it all.
Right.
In which I also think that with Stormblood, I think Stormblood also did a lot of stuff that like allowed you to really care about what happened, where it's like Heavensward was very Final Fantasy-esque, whereas Stormblood was very like, I guess it was kind of like a stray from traditional Final Fantasy, where it was like, we're gonna talk about a lot of things that don't seem very fantastic and definitely aren't very interesting, but they're very important to talk about.
Right.
And I think another thing is, I think Final Fantasy Stormblood gave me a lot of Final Fantasy 12 vibes, because I think 12 was the same way, where it's like 12 wasn't really fantastical in a sense, like where you're not you're
it was very political.
Yeah, it was very, very political, and like it very much focused and centered on character stories rather than the overarching plot of what's going on.
Yeah. I like Stormblood a lot. Of the 3 expansions, it's my least favorite. Again, it's really good.
Yeah.
That's not a dog.
Yeah. I actually remember watching I got in this huge kick of just like watching people's reactions to like Shadowbringers and like Stormblood and stuff like that. And there was one guy on YouTube that I saw, and he was like doing like kind of like a review of Stormblood. And he's like, his introduction was, just as a quick introduction to how I feel about Stormblood, my quickie review is Stormblood is great. You guys are just mean. Because a lot of people I think rag on Stormblood for it just being it is a little dry and it's a little boring, but it does talk about things that it's like, it talks about issues that you don't want to think about, but you have to.
Oh yeah,
they're important. They're important for character development, and they're important just in general.
For me, I honestly thought that the characterization was top notch. Like, I loved Yatsuyu, I know not a lot of people did. I thought she was a really good character.
Yeah,
she had you're not supposed to like her.
I think a lot of the villains in Stormblood, I feel like you're not supposed to like them. Like,
but they end up being some of the best villains.
Yeah, and that's I think that goes back to our previous Xenos thing of like
he's the
people
best.
don't like Xenos because it's like, oh, Xenos is so one-dimensional and so boring. I'm like, Xenos is a great villain. Like,
why
do
people love the Joker? Like, one-dimensional villains are some of the best because you don't have to worry about like, well, what are they thinking? They're thinking they want to murder everyone.
They want to.
That's what they're thinking. Like, not everybody has to be like an anti-hero. Not everybody has to have motivations that are like understandable. Being a pure evil villain is you don't want them to win, but you want to see how the hero, specifically
wanna
in
see it
this
play out.
case, like how you're going to have to deal with that.
And I think in Stormblood's villains, villains in Stormblood, like if you look at the villains in Heaven's Ward, I won't say they were predictable, but I will say, I'll say that they're predictable, but I don't mean that in a bad sense, you know? Like the villains in Heaven's Ward were very predictable, but you know, it fit in well enough where it's like, oh yeah, this is still very interesting, it's very captivating. But you know kind of how, not necessarily how it's going to play out, but it's very easy to read, you know? Like at no point are you confused about what's happening.
I was honestly like heartbroken when Tsuyu ended up taking the route that she did. Because I was like, man, she had like personal growth. And like it was all ripped away from her because of her horrible sibling.
And I think with Stormblood, with the villains in Stormblood, your first initial reaction is, I don't like this person. Maybe you like, you don't like them because they're a villain, or you don't like them because of the stuff that they're doing. But then you get more into it, and you're like, oh, this is really more just like a tragic hero sort of deal. Where it's like these villains are like, you know, it gives you more reason to maybe not like them, but you understand them a lot better. Of like, oh, this is why it's like this. Right. And I think Stormblood does a really good job at kind of being like, you don't like it. It's the old cliche of don't judge a book by its cover. Where it's like you simply just don't know what's going on through a person's head. And I think Stormblood does a very, very good job at doing that in multiple ways. I will say that with Shadowbringers, though, I would say that with Shadowbringers does, so the way that, actually, I'll back up. The way that I describe all the expansions is, you play, to anyone who is new to playing them, or is like just thinking about getting into them, I always tell them, you know, ARR, play it. You play ARR, not because it's a good story, but it sets the groundwork for everything that's going to happen. You know, it's very dry, it's very boring, but it sets the groundwork for everything that happens in the future. Then you get to Heaven's Ward, and you're like, oh, this is an actually fun game. Because Heaven's Ward ramps everything up by at least to a degree of like 6 or 7. And to the point where like you start to actually getting invested in what's happening, what people are saying, and who the characters are. And then you come to Stormblood, and Stormblood basically was like, all right, we're going to try, I think Heaven's Ward was the expansion where Final Fantasy XIV figured out what they were as a game and how they were going to do stuff. And then Stormblood comes around, and it's like, okay, we know what works, we know what to do. We're going to try and tinker with just a couple things. We're going to tinker with some stuff, see what works, see what we can do to keep it fresh, and, you know, we'll see what happens. When we get to Shadowbringer goes, okay, we know exactly what works. Now let's turn all of that to 11.
Yeah.
Like, we know exactly what works, we know exactly what we're doing, now let's ramp it up.
The way that you described 14, or specifically ARR, is how I describe Mass Effect 1. I highly recommend anybody play that game. Well, the series, because it's very good. It's one of my favorite series of all time. And Mass Effect 1 kind of sucks in hindsight. Like, I do enjoy going back and playing it, but it's really hard to recommend anybody who hasn't played it before. But that's where you get invested in most of the characters, because they are returning characters. And if you don't spend 60 plus hours with these people, because the intended way to play the original game, at least to get to Mass Effect 2, is to do 2 playthroughs, so that you can, there are 60 levels that you can get, and you are supposed to get about 30 levels per run. And by that point, you have completed the game. And that really does give you a lot of time to get invested and play throughout all the characters' storylines and like side missions. And if you don't do that in I didn't hit it the second time. Anyway, if you don't do that, I don't think that you're doing yourself a service in playing the games, and I don't think you're doing yourself a service in like understanding what's going to happen later. And shows that like I had the same experience because I didn't appreciate some of the characters because I didn't know what they went through in A Realm Reborn.
Yeah.
Which kind of sucks. Like, I have an appreciation for them now, but it's only in hindsight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
I can watch what happens, but I also that requires effort.
Yeah, that's work. And like, at that point, you're just watching a movie. Like, it's not the same.
Right.
The game takes.
But if I'm sitting down to play the game, I want to play the game. I don't want to sit down to log into the game to watch a movie.
Yeah, I will admit that I remember when I first started playing 14, and I was kind of like, I was very apprehensive to having to pay for a subscription. Obviously that's money, one thing. But another thing, it's like, you know,
you had to buy the game.
You had to buy the game. You have to keep paying in order to play the game. Like, that was just kind of like, oh, that obviously didn't sit well with me.
Right.
And I mean, that's an understandable thing.
Which is fair.
It's a fair concern. But I will say that, and maybe just because this is just because I'm already a slave to Final Fantasy 14 already, so I'm kind of biased at this point. But I will admit that Final Fantasy 14 is one of those few games where I feel that I can give it money and I can immediately see where that money is going to, and I don't feel like my money is being wasted away, which is nice.
The funny thing is, like, I have alwa's been like kind of hard on. I've been very critical of pay-to-play games because like that's my money that I'm giving every week. Like, is this justified? Can I really think that I'm getting $15 worth or whatever amount per month? Is this really fulfilling that? Or am I just kind of playing through it because it's fun, but like if it didn't have a service charge, then I might not even like want to play the game, you know?
Right, yeah.
Like, am I only playing it because I have to pay for it? But like with 14, I didn't play for 3 months, and I was like, hey, I don't even want to cancel because there's a point that I might just want to log in one day and just play because the game is that good and enticing, and I might not always want to play it, but I never don't want to play it. If that makes sense.
You never feel bad for playing it.
No, most of the time.
Most of the time, yes. I mean, obviously, there are moments where you get frustrated with the game, but like, you play the game. You're never kind of like, oh, why? You never ask yourself, why am I playing this game?
Oh yeah, like even when we were doing mount grinding last night.
Yeah.
Or whenever we try to grind out for weekly armor, or we're trying to get a minion from a raid, like even if I miss out by 1 point, like I may get angry, but I'm like, all right, let's do it again.
Yeah, we go
like,
again.
It's a good kind of anger. Like it's almost inspiring. You're like, all right, let's do this. Yeah. I had fun, or at least hopefully you have fun. And yeah, I don't think that there's ever been a time where I'm like, I hate what I'm doing. Like, I may not like a mechanic, but eventually I will try to learn it, and if I don't, then that's my own fault.
Yeah.
Then I can kind of make fun of myself and being like, well, I'm just bad, so it's okay. Like Copied Factory. I had never liked Copied Factory, but that's because I wasn't super great at some of the mechanics, and now I'm like, nah, Copied Factory isn't that bad. I was just stupid. Okay. I don't have the tick on me. Oh, people are scaring me.
All right. Well, I think that's enough talking about 14 and
14.
sucking its dick. But you mentioned that you wanted to talk about other Final Fantasy games, correct?
Yes. Yeah, and I do not have a whole lot of experience playing. Well, I've never beaten a mainline Final Fantasy title.
Really?
No, never.
Wow, that's surprising.
But I do have a lot of, like, these are my top favorite Final Fantasies because they are the ones that I have played the most, or I have like actual nostalgia for, because like it was my first one, or I
Chaotic wants to know how.
Huh?
Chaotic wants to know how.
How have I never beaten one?
Have you never beaten a mainline
because they're really fucking long. And like I mentioned before, I have a very short attention span. So I love Final Fantasy as a series. Yeah. And I have a whole lot of respect for it. I think it's really cool. Controversial opinion, I really like Final Fantasy 13 because it was the second Final Fantasy game I ever played.
That's fair.
That's probably one of the reasons.
Probably the reason, yeah.
And I'm willing to accept the fact that it's not good, but I have a weird nostalgia for it. That doesn't like make it that doesn't remove any of its flaws. I'm just able to accept those flaws more than some people because I didn't have the weight of all of these other far superior versions of Final Fantasies to compare it to. My first Final Fantasy ever was Final Fantasy X. And that, oh god, why did I move? Damn. All right. I haven't done that mechanic yet, so Final Fantasy X is by far my favorite. I love all the characters, I love the world. And I don't really understand why people give it as much crap as they do.
People give Final Fantasy X crap?
Yes. A lot of people
Final
think
Fantasy X?
Yeah, there's a lot of people who don't like the story and kind of how convoluted it is, and I'm like, have you looked at the other Final Fantasy stories before?
Rude.
I mean, like, outside of 1, 2, and 3, all the stories are kind of convoluted and messy.
Yeah.
You know? Like, they're not perfect. But they're all special. And I think that 10 is... It's just so good.
I would honestly say that 10 is probably my favorite Final Fantasy game.
Yeah. I think it's the best one after having played all the ones that I have.
Same. Yeah.
And again, haven't beaten, but all of the ones that I have played any percentage of time
what all Final Fantasy games have you played?
Okay. The first one I ever played was 10. The second was 13. I played 7. I've put some time into 8. I actually beat Crisis Core. Crisis Core is so good.
Quick tangent.
And really needs a remaster.
Quick tangent. I was at my grandparents cleaning their house, and I found an original PSP version of Crisis Core in my grandparents' closet. Yeah. I almost took it home with me, but I was like, nah, it's fine.
I still have my copy. And I played on a busted PS2 or a PSP with like a effed up screen. And so I don't know if you have ever had a messed up joystick or joypad or whatever. Well, okay, I bought mine secondhand. Like somebody else gave it to me. Okay, I have the chains and I've never had this before.
You're gonna walk in the directions. You're gonna walk all the way to the right, like really far.
Okay. Right. Dope. Timed it perfectly. Anyway, but so my PSP, and I got it this way. I do take care of my things too. didn't have the little pad on top of it, so my stick was just a little nubbin. And that's how I played the game. And let me tell you, it hurt so bad. I would play that game like 5-10 hours at a time because it is so good. I couldn't put it down. I loved that game, and is why Zach is my favorite character ever. He's the best. Zach is the best.
He's a good character. He's a really, really good character.
And I hope he sticks around and comes back and gets more love.
Yeah.
Because
same.
I'm very critical of Nomura at this point. Like, I used to think he could do no wrong, but the dude is crazy, and he made one really, really good thing, and it's Zach.
Yeah.
Kingdom Hearts is pretty good.
It's okay.
Like, I will always play it, but it's not getting better.
Yeah.
Which is really sad. Melody Memory was good. You should play that at some point.
I haven't played that yet. I still need to play Remind
what
still,
else?
Honestly.
Out of all of the ones that I've played, I think that's it. Out of all of the ones that I have played, I think 8 was my least favorite.
Okay.
Because of the systems in it were really frustrating.
I would admit that like some of the things in there are really annoying.
My brain just does not like, I know how the junction system works, and my brain does not like the junction system.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So the Final Fantasies that I've played, 10 was the first one I played. I think 10 is actually the first one I beat as well. But I have played 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 Zodiac Age, 13, all the side games for 13, 14, and 15 is what I've played. In which I would say that...
Oh, and I played 15.
Yeah, and I would say that 10 is my favorite. And partly obviously because it's my first one that I've ever played. But I would also say that my least favorite... Oh, boy. I would say my least favorite is probably 7, most likely.
Oh, I love 7.
I just wasn't a fan of the story. Like, the story, like, it's okay, but yeah, like, I loved Crisis Core. And it's really unfortunate that with Crisis Core being a prequel, I felt like, I don't know, like, I think if original 7 had just been like Crisis Core, and then they'd gone from there, I think it would have been awesome. But at 7, it was hard for me to just be invested in the characters. Like, I just kind of, it was just like, I don't know, I always felt that we just happened to be going someplace. You know, there wasn't really like a plan of like, hey, we're gonna go here, and we're gonna go here, and we're gonna do this. It was just sort of like, yeah, we just happened to be going this way, or we just kind of happened to be here. We ended up in this place because who knows why.
To me, like, I get that criticism, but like, to me, in terms of like storytelling, that feels more natural. Like, because you don't always know where you're gonna go. Now, in terms of like structuring something, wow, I actually managed to get hit by that. You want your characters to know what they're doing, because otherwise they seem dumb. But like, in terms of how things actually work in the real world, that is more understandable.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of research into the way that production went for 7, because I do like it so much. And that seems to be the way that it was kind of intended. Maybe not like the story structure, but that it was supposed to be a very real, very personal story.
Yeah. But so, but I will say, but it's and maybe this is just simply because of, obviously it's a dated game, obviously.
Oh yeah, totally.
But I think I will give it points in the fact that, I say that 10 is my favorite, but I think really I have a lot of favorites. Like it's very hard for me to. I will say that 10 is first, and then there's a lot of seconds. Like there's a lot of second place. And which I think my second place ones are gonna be. I loved playing 6. I loved 12 Zodiac Age, and I think Zodiac Age for 12, I think really feels like it's what I wanted 7. It's what I wanted to feel 7 to be. Like I playing through Zodiac Age. It just hearing what you're saying, I just kind of think now, 12 is just a more refined 7. Yeah. It's just a lot more refinement. And I think,
which is funny because that's what a lot of people harp on 12 for too.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, it's too real. It's like, yeah, that's the point.
Yeah, that's
because a lot of people were getting tired of they were tired of the settings that 7 and 8 had done. So that's why they went the route that they did. Like that's why 10 happened. That's why 12 happened.
Yeah.
Like people wanted a more like fantastical kind of actual fantasy setting as opposed to the not cyberpunk, the techno kind of
like techno fantasy.
Yeah, steampunk. That's
sure,
techno steampunk fantasy thing that they did with those two games. So it's literally only the fans' fault for the direction that those games took.
Yeah.
I really want to play 12.
Oh,
and I
so
totally
good.
forgot about 15.
Definitely play Zodiac Age, because original base 12 it's a real, like, nothing in between Zodiac Age and regular 12, nothing changes except for just how they do the license system, basically. Because 12 is like, you can see what they were going for, but they kind of just like, they basically cobbled something. It's the prototype, basically.
Yeah.
Like, the combat system, the mechanics of 12 is the prototype, and Zodiac Age was like, okay, we actually know what we're doing now. Like, this is their actual final product.
I actually think I'm gonna do the international version of 12 with an undub mod on it, because I have done, again, a lot of looking into of pretty much every iteration of Final Fantasy, because like I said, I love the series. I think it's great. I want to play more of them, and I have a whole lot of respect for it. And the international version was a Japanese exclusive, and it's basically the midway, the middle point of Zodiac Age in the original, because the original had a lot of issues. Yeah. But a lot of people are like, Zodiac Age is too easy because they didn't rebalance the dungeons or mobs for the expanded abilities and board licenses of Zodiac Age. So I think for like the truest experience, you would go with international version.
Yeah, okay.
But I mean, if you want to play the best looking, best playing, you go with Zodiac Age.
Oh yeah,
every time.
Yeah,
especially on PC, because mods are a thing, and it's the most like optimized from what I remember. Mm-hmm. And you can get some bonuses that the console versions don't have, which is always nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Chaotic is saying that Zodiac Age was actually never meant to have dual jobs. So
they just left it in.
I guess so.
Dummies.
Yeah, and that's probably where that's where the problem kind of lies. So it's like, because you have those dual specializations, it's just like, oh, you can just almost do everything.
Yeah, I mean, it gets to like, okay, the Final Fantasy X brokenness.
Yeah, you get to the point. You get to a point where you're always prepared for something.
Right.
And like, while that's nice, you know, you would want to be at that point at the end of the game.
Yeah, not how Final Fantasy VIII lets you have Kiragas and like 8,000 health after the first dungeon.
I remember when I was Final Fantasy VIII was actually one of the first games that I started streaming, and I remember I had some people in my chat come in and they were like helping me through the game, like they were kind of like being like, oh, you know, go check this place out, go check this place out. And I remember they're like, all right, we're going to get you a super awesome summon. Just go to this island over here. And I'm like, okay, I mean, isn't, I was already hesitant. I'm like, this isn't like some sort of like secret raid boss thing, is it? Like, and they're like, well, I mean, it is optional, but you should be fine. Like, it shouldn't be a problem at all. They set me up against Bahamut.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and I was like, oh, this is a problem.
You're all dicks.
Yeah, and I was like, well, this is awkward because the thing is that it, like, I can't remember how exactly it worked out anymore, but if I remember correctly, it was like people wanted, you know, at first it was just going to be a joke, but unfortunately I had saved right before the encounter, so I was trapped there, and I'm like,
no.
We have to actually do this.
I have to figure out how to beat this thing.
I was super underleveled, and like I didn't have any of the stuff that like would work for normal strats.
Right.
But I remember that I ended up having to actually I had to hardcore cheese it in order to win. Because I think what I did was I had an item that caused meltdown, and meltdown was a debuff that you can put on an enemy where they take more physical damage.
Yeah.
It basically reduces their defense, I think, all the way down to 0 or something like that. And I remember the strat that we ended up doing was, we're like, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to use this item to give it meltdown. And then you're just going to limit break Zell, and that's all you're going to do. And I remember I had to do a crash course of like, how do I use Zell's limit break? Because I don't understand how it works. And it's really, it's just like it's a time thing where you have to, you're just putting in combos like a fighting game. Because that's all Zell
limit
does.
Breaks
it's just fighting
is
game.
So hard.
Oh,
like in any game, if you don't know what you're doing. I remember using Lulu's for the first time, and I'm like,
oh, yeah.
there's no indicator of what to do at all. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I had to look it up. Wow, I got hit. I'm stupid. I had to look it up. No idea what I was freaking doing. And I'm like, oh, cool. All right. So I just rotate the sticks. Yeah, but it's not like rotate it crazy fast. It's like you have to be on it. You have to know exactly what you're doing. And I didn't. It wasn't that easy, and it definitely was not telegraphed.
Yeah.
Which is frustrating.
Chaotic is saying that the reason they kept the dual jobs in was people were complaining about the single jobs. So,
yeah.
One of those things where it's like the fans kind of just did it this way.
Yeah, you are the reason for your own discontent.
Yeah.
I mean, that comes back to so many games. Like, you're gonna complain about not getting something for X amount of time, and then you bully a studio into releasing it, and then it comes out bad, or not in a way that you want it, and you're like, well, what the hell is this? Like, well, that was your own fault. All right, I died on this part last time.
Just, pay attention to where the towers are falling. Don't go by the shadow, by the way. That doesn't help.
Yeah. Man, this one is really fun.
Yeah. I so as you can see if you're watching the podcast rather than listening to it, with Shadowbringers, so Shadowbringers has alliance raids, which are 24-man raids. There's usually 3 of them in an expansion. And for Shadowbringers specifically, they paired up with Yoko Taro and designed basically just near alliance raids. And they are fun, but boy, howdy do they hurt.
They have mechanics.
They have mechanics, all right. They definitely have mechanics. But I guess going back to 14.
Oh, I walked in the thing.
And how? That's
why?
Going back to 14. I do like. I think 14 does a really good job at putting cameos in, which I really respect. Like,
yeah.
You know, it's one thing to just being like, oh look at this reference that we're doing from a previous Final Fantasy game, haha, jokes. But 14 actually I think does a really good job at being like, yeah, we have this cameo, but there's a reason that we have the cameo. You know, we're not just putting.
Yeah,
it
they
in
don't
just
do
because.
anything. They do everything. I'm dead.
Yeah.
Everything they do is for a reason.
Yeah, everything they do has some sort of point to it, which I
even
really,
Kefka.
really appreciate. Even Kefka.
And I really liked the Kefka fight. That was really cool.
Yeah. Actually, this fun fact is that the Savage mode of the Kefka fight has a second phase to it, and it's him becoming not to spoil it, not in the meaning of spoiling it, but I'm going to anyways. The second phase of the Kefka fight is he actually becomes the god, and you have to fight him as God Kefka instead, similar to 6.
God.
And it's awesome. I did it only once, and I'm like, oh, this is a nightmare, and I love it. Boom.
That's probably
Final
one of my
Fantasy VI,
favorite
though.
moments.
Yeah, speaking of 6, though, I love 6. Like, 6 was a game that I didn't expect to love, and then I finished it, and I'm like, I'm so sad that it's over.
I knew you were gonna like it.
Like, I was legitimately just so upset that I'm like, I'm done playing 6, and I'm just sad about it.
It's very good.
It's super good. It's fantastic. I will definitely say, though, that Terra is definitely not the main character, though.
No.
Like, 100%, Terra is not the main character. And I'm like, dude, Celeste is absolutely the main character of this game.
Terra gets way too much credit.
She does! She absolutely does, and it frustrates me.
Ooh, I rolled a 31.
I rolled 26.
I got a 96 on one of the hairstyles. Ooh.
Nice.
Ooh, I rolled a 74 on the
I
bard
did not
chest.
roll high for anything.
Oh, come on.
And I'm upset by it.
Uh-oh. Oh, no. Oh, no.
You okay there,
I rolled
champ?
greed on the gloves of maiming before the...
Oh, did you
why
get
did
them?
I do that? Yes. I had a chance of getting the... Why did I do that? I should have waited. Oh, no. Oh, no.
Man. Fantastic.
I want to know who got the...
Fantastic.
I want to know what the person who
love
got
it.
the thing was.
It's probably
they
one of the
rolled.
bards that I had to guess.
Iola and Tychtus.
So good.
That's so my own fault.
That's awesome. That's amazing. 10 of 10, buddy.
What did I roll on it? I think I rolled like a 70.
Oh, I rolled so low. I didn't even roll higher. I didn't roll higher than 50. Oh, so to going back to our previous conversation, just really quickly.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't have got it anyway. All right. I mean, that sucks that I got something for another class, but they rolled a 99, so I wouldn't have got it anyway.
Okay. So, I mean, at least it worked out.
Yeah, I mean, and it's for Dragoon that I got it for, so.
Oh, yeah. Okay, hold on. I gotta find this thing real quick. Where?
I mean, I have a 520 now, so that's cool.
Yeah, got that going for you, which is nice. But talking about being a creator and kind of the struggles in which being a creator kind of brings, there's a webtoon that I used to read. It actually just finished because it was going to be published as a book actually, and I'm trying to find it and I can't, and I'm very upset that I can't find it. Oh, there it is. It's called The Art of Being an Artist by Stephen McCraney, and I'll quickly put this in the link dump for people to check out. But it's a webtoon, and it's simply just kind of the it's this author kind of just sharing his perspective on what it's like to be an artist, and kind of the sort of the challenges to it, and kind of the tips and things that he's learned going through all this stuff, and kind of sharing, the stuff that he's figured out that has helped him, that he wishes he knew when he first started.
Sure.
Man, I can't.
Where are you?
There it is. All right, yeah, and I'll put this in the link dump. But he mentioned something that he mentioned something similar to what you said, of setting, when it comes to setting goals. One of the things that the problem that you have for is there are certain fallacies that you watch out for, and I'll quickly kind of paraphrase some of them, but one of them being the magic brush fallacy, which is you see someone who puts out a piece of work, and you ask them, and again, from an artist perspective, you ask them, oh, what kind of brush do you use? And like, oh, well, I use this, this, and this. Mm-hmm. And you somehow think, because if you have the same tool, then you would be able to do the exact same stuff. Like, right. And I think that's really similar to, for streaming. It's like, you always ask people, what kind of stuff do they use? What kind of gear they use? While yes, sure, having that gear is nice, you still have to put in that sort of, you have to know how to use it. You have to know how to do it. Another fallacy that he mentions is the impossible math fallacy, which is, and this is the one that reminded me of when you were setting goals, where it's like, if you say if I stream every day for 5 hours and I can get 3 viewers every day, then by the end of the week I'll have, and I stream all week, I'll have an average of 27 viewers, but unfortunately doing that math and setting that goal for yourself, it's not possible. Like just unfortunately it's just not, it's not realistic enough, because you run the problem of like if you go below that math, you start getting math results that are lower than what you expected, that becomes really, really discouraging. But I highly recommend, like, this is one of those webtoons that I fell in love with simply just because of it allowed me to understand, one, I'm not the only one that has these problems, and two, these were things that I wish I knew when I first started out, and these are things that eventually I started learning for myself. But at the same time, I think they're important reminders at the bare minimum to kind of be like, oh right, these are the things that I need to be asking myself constantly, or these are questions. There are questions that I need to be asking myself. These are just things that I need to remind myself all the time, and it's a wonderful, wonderful webtoon, and it's beautifully drawn, and I love it a lot, and I think it's important for anyone who wants to be a creator or wants to do something creatively in a more past, like, just as a hobbyist level, I would say. Yeah.
That's pretty much where I am.
Yeah. That was one of the things that I wanted to circle back on real quick. But let's see here. There was something else that I wanted to say, and I don't remember what it was, and I'm desperately trying to remember what it is.
Well, one thing I wanted to, what would be your top 5 Final Fantasies? And what grade would you give them?
Ooh, okay.
Like out of 10. Like, I don't want to make it a tier list. Okay. I don't want it to be too long. But like, what are your top 5s, and what grade would you give them?
Top 5s. Oh god. Okay. I'll start.
Side games can be included because
Yep,
I
okay.
definitely have to put Crisis Core on there because it's the only one that I finished.
Oh Lord Almighty! All right, I'm gonna give you 5, but I'm not gonna rank them. These are just
Okay.
gonna be.
These
this
are your
is just
5
a list.
favorites.
Yeah, these are just
Okay.
5 favorites because I can't. I just physically can't.
Fair enough.
So for number 1, I'll say 14. Primarily because I play it the most.
Duh.
And yeah, because duh. And I will give it.
Oh.
I'd give it I'll give it a solid. I'll give it an 8.5 out of 10. I would give it a 10 out of 10, but because of
A Realm Reborn exists.
no, it's not because of that. It's because of the fact that it is an MMO, it's an MMO and it's a pay subscription MMO is the thing.
Sure.
Like those are
That's fair.
2 of the heaviest kind of factors when it comes to new players.
Mm-hmm.
As well as a Realm Reborn, but that's what you can convince someone to play. And obviously there's always the meme of you can play Final Fantasy 14. It's like a 60 to 90 day trial, I want to say. With the whole Heaven's Word expansion, free to play. Up to level 60. Blah 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 this, blah 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 that. But it is nice that Final Fantasy or that Square is like, yeah, we want people to play this game, and we know that ARR is ARR. So
Right.
And you always constantly have people say, play ARR, but once you hit Heaven's Word, I guarantee you'll love this game. Like I absolutely guarantee that you'll love this game. And so yeah, I'll say 14 is an 8.5 just because. And I will say that one of the good and bad things about Final Fantasy 14 is that it is a Final Fantasy game first and an MMO second, which is both a very good and a very bad thing. Because if you were looking for an MMO, cool, awesome, but if you've played previous MMOs, it's very, very different. And it
Sure.
can be very, very jarring to some people.
Sure.
Number 2...
I definitely felt that
Yeah.
firsthand.
Yeah. Number 2, I'll say 10, and I'll probably give that an... Oh, man. I'll give it a 9. One, because it's the first Final Fantasy game I ever played / beaten. And I remember playing it when I played it for the first time. It was back in like middle school, high school when I started playing it. Actually no, this was actually back in middle school. And like in middle school, I was your typical angsty teen, angsty tween. I didn't openly show it, but I had my own demons, quote unquote, my own cringe demons. And playing 10 was a game that it was a game that I could relate to. It was a game that I could kind of be like, because it touched upon, it touched upon romance, being in a place that you were not used to, wanting to be something that maybe you're not living in. It touched upon living in someone else's shadow, kind of filling in those shoes that you have those expectations that you want to be, as well as it touched upon a lot of other personal things that maybe I didn't experience but other people could have experienced. And I think 10 was a game that you always have people talk about their first Final Fantasy or like games that they played when they were a kid, and 10 was definitely a game that always. It's a game that I will always look back and be like, yes, this was a game that I would for sure say that defined my generation.
Right.
Because I think it was. It definitely was, So for that I would give it a 9 out of 10. That score's a little biased, but that's where I'm at for that. Number 3,
Nostalgia plays a big factor in stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's important.
Yeah, number 3 will probably be, I'll say Zodiac Age. And it's because Zodiac Age was a game, it's Zodiac Age specifically because it made everything better, but I'll just say 12 in general. But 12 was a game that I didn't expect to like as much as I did. 12 was a game that the story, I think 12 is a game that is probably the most digestible Final Fantasy game, especially for people who have never played a Final Fantasy before in their life. I think 12 is a very easily digestible game where it's not like super over the top. It's not like super disconnecting where it's very hard to relate. 12 does a really good job at giving you an interesting enough storyline and really actually liking and being invested in the characters. I think 12 does a really, really good job at bringing in people who've never played a Final Fantasy game, even bringing in people who've never played a video game all that much. I think 12 does a really good job at being like, oh, you're not just playing a game, you are playing a movie. You're playing a play, really, is what you're doing in 12.
Right. Yeah.
And the story does a wonderful job at...
Square does that really well.
Yeah, Square does a really good job in general at showing you the story, showing you the setting, and putting you in the shoes of your characters where you to a point where you legitimately care about them and you want to know what happens or how does it get better or how does it get worse, you know? And so I would give 12... I'd probably give 12 I'll give base 12 a 6. Because as awesome and as great as the story 12 is, base 12, the controls for it are just they're so difficult and they're just so awkward for it. And it's just like, I want to enjoy this game, but I can't because I can't get the controls to work. Zodiac Age makes it easier, but it at least lets me play the game to a point where it's like, I know what I'm doing and I can actually focus on other stuff. And so I'd probably give it an 8.5 as well. Because, also Zodiac Age, actually no, also 12 in general is really cool because it gives you kind of like that small extra bit of like, hey, you want to know how coding works? Here's like a really basic way of how coding works. And I'm like, oh, that's super, super interesting. That's super fascinating. And you know, if you don't like it, then it's like, it's just a mechanic. But if you enjoy it, then it's like, oh, that's really, really cool. And like, I would potentially want to learn more about that, which is, it does a really good job about that. So that's number 3. Number 4. Yeah, this is when it starts getting difficult. Number 4, I'll say Crisis Core. And I like Crisis Core because, again, it does a really good job at giving you characters that you are emotionally invested in. And it gives you a narrative that isn't super fantastical. It's not super fantasy to the point where it's hard to kind of relate, but it gives you a setting and it gives you characters that allows you to kind of relate to at least one. Yeah, you are able to relate to at least one character. And sometimes that's not even the main character sometimes, which I think good video games, I would say, that have characters where even if they're not the main character, they are still treated as such. And I think good narrative video games do that very, very well, in which Crisis Core does an amazing job at it. And so I would say Crisis Core is probably a 7, and that sounds really low, but at the same time, it's only because of one, some people don't know about Crisis Core, which is a travesty.
Yeah,
truly.
And it's on the PSP.
And it was on the PSP, and it's like, cool.
It's so like, limited.
It's such a hidden gem for it. Yeah, like it's such a hidden gem, and it's like you want it to have the re-release respect that it deserves. And it doesn't get it, and it's sad.
Make it a full-fledged game.
Yeah.
And they're not going to do that. And you know why? Because we're getting the iOS thing that covers Crisis Core.
Yeah, and it's so sad.
That's so upsetting.
It's like, God damn it.
Son of a bitch.
For number 5, God. Oh, number 5 this one's going to be difficult. Okay, for number 5, I'm gonna say 6, but I'm gonna give honorable mention to 15. And I'll explain why. 6 also has the same deal as 12, where I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. Especially because it's lower graphics, obviously because it's an older game, as well as I find it, for me personally, I find it really difficult for me to be invested in characters that don't have voice lines to them. Like, if there's no semblance of voice acting, it's very difficult for me to be invested in them, because at that point, it really just feels like I'm reading a book. And sure, I can get invested in characters in a book, but for some reason, I just can't make that connection in a video game. And I think it's because I'm part of it, and so I want there to be that extra flavor to it, because I'm a part of the story. But that being said, 6 does a really good job at being able to, you read the dialogue for 6, and you can just hear in your head, you can hear the emotion, and like you can hear what the character sounds like in your head, which I think does a really good job at that. And it gives you can still feel the personality even though you can't hear the character, which is really awesome. And I think it also does a really good job at, again, not being super fantastical. Sure, it's pretty fantastical, and it's it's very fantasy-esque, but I think it still does a good enough job at giving you a story that is not super disconnecting. I will say, and I would give 6. Honestly, I'll give 6 a 6, which again sounds really low, but it's because of the gameplay. The gameplay kind of makes it really difficult sometimes. In this aspect of, like, I know I definitely looked up a guide for 6 when I got near the end, because spoiler alert, at the end, like at one point in the game, all your like party members are like spread around the world, and you get like 2 or 3 of them back as like kind of like narrative story.
Swaggins. Oh god.
But you get a couple of them back because obviously you need to have a party. But all the other characters are optional, and I'm like, I don't know where anything is. I don't know where these people are. I don't know where to go. And I think older Final Fantasy games have that problem where it's like they just sort of expect you to know what to do, even if you've never played before. And it's like, sure, you play it multiple times, you eventually get it, but at the same time, it's like, dude, I just want to play the game. Like, come on. And that gets kind of difficult. I will.
Yeah.
I will say that. So 15 I will give 15 honorable mention. Because of the fact that, as much as people don't like 15, I actually really, really enjoyed 15. And what redeems 15 for me is I love the music for 15.
Really?
15's, yeah. Oh, I love the 15 soundtrack, to be completely honest.
I should probably sit down and listen to it. I don't recall it very well.
It's wonderful. Like for Final Fantasy X, the soundtrack is iconic. Oh yeah. 15 is.
I listened to that to fall asleep.
Yeah. Oh, same. But when I played 15, like listening to the soundtrack of 15, like I got the same sort of feeling and memories of me listening to the 10 soundtrack, of just like the emotions and like just how everything sounds in the 15 soundtrack. Just you can just feel you can just kind of hear the time and the effort that went into making this music, and it's beautiful.
Totally.
I would say, I can't remember. I honestly, unfortunately, awkwardly, I can't tell you like what the titles are anymore, but my 2 favorite songs are Somnus, which is the main theme, so I remember that one, and then I can't quite remember what the other one is, but it's basically it's the theme when you fight any sort of like major boss, or like when you fight any sort of like... Oh, that one's
pretty good. The summons.
It's not the summons. It's when you fight it's when you fight a boss. So, like you do like any of the major hunts. It's that song that played.
Okay.
I want to say
I was
it's
thinking
like,
of the Ramu one because the
no,
Ramu one was
yeah, no, it's not
awesome.
that. It's when you do any sort of hunt. It's that song that plays. I want to say it's like. See, the problem is like I don't remember because it's Latin. It's a Latin title, and I'm like, I definitely don't fucking remember this. But it's like something Lacrima, I want to say. Something like that. I'd have to look it up. I'll probably look it up and put it in the link dump after we're done here. But yeah, those two, like, listening to Somnus, both the instrumental and the one with lyrics version, they are probably my favorite songs I've ever heard in a Final Fantasy game. Next to, like, they're like Xanarkin level, like, praise is what I'll give them.
Because Xanarkin is like one of the greatest Final Fantasy songs of all time.
Yes, 100%. But yeah, so that's my tier list.
Well, mine will probably be a little bit quicker because, like, I don't have a wealth of experience with a lot of them. To my own chagrin, I love them, and I'm trying to actively play more. But so for me, 10 is at the top. It's the first one I ever played. It's the one that I have the most experience with. The soundtrack is the best thing ever. I love all the characters, even Kimari, who I don't use.
Oh man!
And I feel so bad.
Kimari, like, they did Kimari so dirty.
Kimari's such a great character that is usually so underutilized by everybody. Oh, that hurts. And it's not even his own fault.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like they let you do with him what you want, and it's like, unless you know exactly what you're doing at the outset, most of the time you're gonna be just underutilizing him, and it's sad. Anyway, yeah, so I would probably give 10 like a 9. I will always go back to that game, and I know I will even after I beat it, because I want to really get the 100% on it at some point, and I know how stupid of a goal that is. But
I did that, and then I regretted it, and I'm like, nah. I got close to it. I got as close as you possibly could get.
Sure.
Without actually doing it.
It's just a timeless game for me, and I always want to go back and play more. Second is probably 14. And my second and third, I will say, are tied. So because I have actually beaten, quote unquote, this game and the other game, because 14 has made me feel things. And I'm going to give 14 a higher score than you did. I'd probably give it like an 8.5.
I did give it an 8.5.
You did give it an 8.5?
Yes.
Okay, never mind. All right, then. Yeah, like, and in my thing, I'm not going to detract any points from it for being a service model game, because it's like, if you're going to play 14, you know what you're getting into. Like, you have to be willing and prepared to do that. The only thing that brings it down for me is ARR and the length of the patch quests. In general, like, even the good ones, they are lengthy and they can eat up a lot of time.
Yeah. But I mean, that being said, is that again, it's a Final Fantasy game first and an MMO second. No, and that's fair. It's just, it's one thing that always has bothered me. I'm just like, okay, I'm done. I want to be done now. I will admit that every time the patch drops when I stream them, I'm always like, oh, MSQ is not going to take that long, and then it's always the longest thing that I do.
Yeah, I know.
And it takes me forever.
It always shocks me, because you're like, am I going to stay up and play through all this? And I'm like, no, take a nap, because it's going to take you like 4 hours to get through this. And you're like, nah.
Yeah, and then I never listen. Like, and I don't know why.
Just listen. Yeah,
I'm always just like, why? I always think that
now I want to die.
It's only gonna take a couple hours, and then by the time I'm almost done, I'm falling
4
asleep
hours
because I've been
later.
awake for I've been awake for 11 hours, and I'm like,
Yeah.
fuck. Like for
So,
6 more,
yeah.
I've been awake for 6 more hours than I should have been.
8.5 for me. All of the expansions are amazing. Even my least favorite, Stormblood, is one of the best games I've ever played. So that says a lot.
Yeah.
Like, then I'd have to go Crisis Core, because it takes the characters that everyone loves from 7, like it makes Sephiroth a more real character. And I don't want to like say he's more relatable, because I don't like the relatable villains.
Definitely not relatable.
But and while I did say before that not every villain needs a tragic backstory, we already knew some of what it was, and this gives you more context and makes it more believable.
Yeah.
While Genesis, a lot of people don't really like him. I think he's cool. And as long as you only look at him as like, he's cool, don't think about anything else, because he totally breaks Final Fantasy's canon, or Final Fantasy VII's canon, then it's really cool. The battle system is really well done. I really, especially considering it's on the PSP.
Yeah.
Now, like, if this was a PS2 game, there would be something to be said about that. Like, it would probably be the worst Final Fantasy mechanically, but because of the system that it's on, I think it deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah.
Like Birth by Sleep on the PSP is really good, but Birth by Sleep, once they put it on PS4, it's like, oh, I get it. This game sucks.
Chaotic says Genesis is the reason we don't get a re-release.
Yeah, exactly. It is all his fault why we will never get to play that game on a good console. A better console. Yeah. Because the PSP is awesome and heavily underrated. I'd probably give that one, and I'd probably give that like a 9.5.
Wow. Okay.
It's like, I want to give it a higher score, because it deserves it. I can't give it a 10 because it's limited to what it can do. Even if 7 didn't exist, I think Crisis Core would be really good. And again, don't think about Genesis. If you don't think about Genesis, it's fine. It's great. it's an almost perfect game for me. I love that game. That's 3 is probably 13. Or sorry, 4 is probably 13. And I know it's bad. I know it's just walking down a hallway simulator, even more so than 10 was.
Oh yeah.
But
at least 10, it was a really wide hallway.
Yeah, and the vistas were pretty.
Yeah.
It wasn't just you're walking around in crystal areas and, you know, whatever that means.
Yeah.
But the soundtrack alone is what kept me going. Because
Interesting.
One thing that I always say about 13 is it's full of amazing characters that are horrible, and characters that you love but you hate. Like, I love Snow, but he is the worst.
Oh my god.
And I love Hope, but he is the worst.
God.
And like,
Oof.
I think that just about anybody can understand that. Maybe not agree with me, but they can understand.
Yeah, I'm one of those
I'm
people.
from.
Or I can understand it. I won't agree with you, but I'll understand it.
I don't think that 13 has good characters except for Zaz. I think Zaz is hands down the best character.
Probably the best character in that game. Yeah.
Fang is also pretty good.
It's okay. Yeah.
I don't think she gets enough time in the game.
Yeah, agreed.
To really flesh out her character. And I also think people give Vanille way too much flack.
Vanille
which is especially depressing because like a lot of people apparently gave the Vanille voice actress a lot of shit because they're like, she doesn't even sound Australian. That's her actual voice.
Is she actually Australian?
She is actually Australian. That is her actual voice.
Amazing.
And people are like, oh, the accent sounds so fake. It's like, no,
so
that's where she's actually from.
It feels so bad.
Y'all are just stupid.
Oof.
And hypercritical.
Ouch.
Yes, Hope is hot garbage. He is terrible, but I love that boy with all of my heart. I love him to death, and I hate him.
God.
Let's see. Last, boy.
It's
7.
hard, right? It gets hard.
Fifth is probably 7. I've put a lot of time into 7. I do admit that there are a lot of issues with it, narratively especially. But I think that the Final Fantasy that we know today would not exist without 7, and
Sure.
I give that a lot of credit. I'd probably give it like a 7.5 or an 8, because while everyone will tout the originals, especially 4, 5, and 6, for being like those are the best Final Fantasies, especially if you're talking classic Final Fantasy, but in terms of like narrative structure and the Final Fantasies that we think of now, and the impact they especially had, or that 7 had on RPGs and games moving forward, 7 is such an important game.
Sure, yeah. I would agree with you saying that 7 was a trailblazer. Like, sure, it wasn't
in so many aspects.
and a lot of like the problems and fallacies that 7 has, older newer Final Fantasies took that and they refined it and they made it better.
Yeah.
Because they knew it was like, okay, here's what worked, here's what didn't, because of what 7 did.
Yeah, and I give 7 credit for that, as opposed to being like, well, because these newer ones have done this, after 7 did it, it's like, or 7 didn't do it, it's like, no, 7 is the reason that exists.
Yeah, it's because they didn't do it that they're doing it now.
Yeah, that gives me more respect for 7. And after the research that I did looking into 7 and like the path that the writers took, I just like am blown away by what happened in the development process and the writing staff, and how personal it was to I always forget his name and I feel really bad. The guy who made the original 5 Final Fantasies.
I want to say it Nobuo Uematsu, but that's
no,
that's
he's
right.
He's the composer.
It's like, that's not right.
Crap, I feel really bad now.
We'll look it up after we're done with this.
Yeah. Anyway, because that was a very personal story for him. Around, I think it was either before, or like just before or during Final Fantasy VII, the production, his mom died. And he wanted to write a very personal story about loss. And like when you look at 7 through that lens, it hits those marks.
Yeah.
Like it really, even if you don't like Aerith, even if you don't like the characterization of people, the whole point is like you become invested in your party the way that you want to run it, and your white mage, the person who heals you, who protects you, who is like will always be there for you, is suddenly gone. Yeah. And there's nothing you can do about it. And like maybe the narrative doesn't do a great job of telling you that to some people, but I think if you go in knowing that, you will have a bigger appreciation for it.
Yeah.
It's not like anybody knew this back in, 1997.
Right, yeah.
But I think 7 ages well, and also ages poorly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
So, I'd probably give it a 7.5, 7 3/4.
Okay.
It deserves a lot of credit, and it also deserves the flack it gets, but the flack it gets is the reason that games exist in the way that they do today. Anyway.
Yeah. I feel bad because I keep circling back to things that we were already talking about. But you mentioning all the research that you did for Final Fantasy VII, I actually did, well, no, I can't say that. I did somewhat some research on Final Fantasy XIV, specifically because of, so at FanFest, Masayoshi Soken, who is the lead sound designer and composer for almost all of the Final Fantasy XIV tracks that you hear in this game. I think he started doing most of his stuff in Heaven's Ward, so that's all the stuff that you hear. Like, all the stuff in ARR, I don't think it's him.
You mean the best soundtracks?
Yeah, the best soundtracks, yeah.
ARR forward?
Yeah. No, because he did everything in Heaven's Ward forward. I don't think he did ARR. I think that was someone else.
That's what I meant. I meant
right.
Heaven's Ward, yeah.
Yeah, but so he revealed that at FanFest, he revealed that last March, he was diagnosed with cancer. And so from March all the way up until October, he did all of his work in the hospital, in a hospital bed.
Crazy.
So that one, and that was comprising insane. All of his music from the patch quest of Shadowbringers, doing all the dungeon stuff. One of the most notable songs from the 5.3 patch is called To the Edge. And he composed that entire thing while in the hospital, while also going through chemotherapy. And it was this, he revealed this, I believe, Sunday, and this was kind of the first time that he publicly revealed this sort of information. And to the surprise of many, including the staff, he specifically didn't want to tell anybody because of the fact that he didn't want to be treated differently, and he didn't want to put any stress on the development team.
Right.
And it was like hearing
that's
that
incredibly noble and incredibly stupid.
Yeah, which I made a tweet about it because it was like in a previous like Q&A panel, Yoshi P, who is the executive producer for Final Fantasy XIV, and I forget what her first name is, but her last name is Ishikawa. They were on a panel together, like a Q&A panel, and both of them were saying that, like, Ishikawa said that she would just stay up for, like, she would just pull 39-hour work days because all she wanted to do was just write, and she just wanted to work on the game because Ishikawa is the lead writer for Shadowbringers. But she was saying that, like, she would pull, like, 39-hour work days just because she wanted to write and work, and she would just get so engrossed by it. And Yoshi P said a similar thing, was like, yeah, like, I would just work constantly because I wanted to work, but, you know, HR didn't want me to do that, and they get mad at me if I did that. And so I made a tweet being like, you know, Ishikawa says, yeah, I used to just pull all-nighters constantly, and Yoshi P is saying, like, oh, yeah, I would just stay up and just do work, and then Shokun's like, yeah, I just had cancer and did work, and meanwhile HR is over here just like, I fucking hate all of you. I hate
all of you.
All of you are awful, and I hate you all. But yeah, so hearing that
You're
story,
saying this like it's funny, but now we're in trouble.
Now we're in trouble, though, and it's a problem. But yeah, so hearing that story, though, got me really curious because of, I guess Soken has been a part of the development team since the 1.0 days. And that really got me curious as to, what was 1.0 like? Because you always hear what 1.0 Final Fantasy XIV was like, and you always hear how much of a dumpster fire it was. That it was arguably the game that almost put Square Enix out of business. But the revival of it was such a crazy turnaround that most experts and analysts would just call it as nothing short of a miracle.
Right.
And I'll put this in the link dump after we're done with this raid, because I'm a little busy right now. But there's a wonderful documentary by a channel called NoClip on YouTube that was made about 3 years ago, and it's a 3-part documentary. I think in total it's about 2 hours long in total. But it's a documentary. It's just simply talking about what happened in that 1.0 time space, you know, and they actually go into the Square Enix office and they interview Yoshi P and like a bunch of other people of just like, you know, what was that like in that 1.0 release, and like just how bad was it? And it's actually revealed
Probably
that
terrifying.
Oh, it was awful. And they talk about like some of the problems that they had and like kind of where some of those problems potentially laid. And it was actually really interesting that I didn't even know about, that they talk about in the documentary, was that when they brought Yoshi P on as producer for the game, one, he had never worked on a Final Fantasy game beforehand, and then two, he spent, I want to say like at least 2 weeks planning out how and what he was gonna do, and he went to the board with two plans. The first plan was he was going to plan A was we're gonna try and fix the game as much as we possibly can, and it's just gonna be like that. Like, we're gonna try and patch as much as we can, and that's it. Plan B was we are going to patch what we can, but at the same time, secretly, we're going to develop an entirely separate game. And speaking of, my game just crashed.
Oh.
My game just crashed. But that was plan B, was that we're gonna patch everything.
Shit.
But secretly, we're also going to be making a brand new game at the same time, secretly. And then we're gonna put that out. And the board was like, okay, we're gonna go, and like, I think he even says that there was that level, there was so much trust behind Yoshi P of like, the board was just like, okay, we're gonna go with plan B. It's not the smartest move, but we're gonna do it. And he's like, okay, here we go. This is how we're gonna do it.
That's so much trust to have in somebody who, like, I don't know about Yoshi P's journey or what he had done up to that point, but like,
he
Final
primarily
Fantasies...
worked on the Dragon Quest games, primarily.
Okay, that's okay.
Primarily did most.
That's
of the,
understandable then.
Yeah,
like, especially if
he
had been very influential in the Dragon Quest games. Like,
yeah, I think if I remember
that says
correctly,
a lot.
he had a pretty big part in the Dragon Quest games. But yeah, it was and that was just like a wild the board said yes. I'm like, okay, this is what we're gonna do.
Alrighty then.
And it was terrifying to kind of they did like a myriad of playtests, of betas and alphas to try and they tried to the biggest thing was they needed to convince the players, hey, come play our shitty game again so we can fix it. And that's what
we
they
know
did.
you hate the first one, so we're doing it again.
So we're doing it again now.
That's asking a lot of people.
Oh yeah, and it's a wonderful documentary. I highly, highly recommend watching it.
Yeah.
It's super, super fascinating, and it similar to how you feel about 7. It just strengthened my respect for 14. Of just like, this game has come so far, and the lengths that it's had to go through are just insane. Oh, it's dead.
It is dead.
I come back and it's dead. But yeah, I want to say the documentary is called like, the channel's called No Clip. I know that much, but it's like, it's something Final Fantasy related or something like that. It's basically just like the Final Fantasy 14. I think part 1 is literally called 1.0. But yeah, and they talk about like, you know, what's it like? How did it feel to put out a game that some of the brightest game developers put all of their effort in, only to have the whole world just being like, this is garbage. This is actually hot trash. And it's wild. And like, yeah, and they talk about the like kind of one of the most important things that they had to do was they had to rebuild that trust. And then when they Yoshi P even says like when they officially announced that they were going to shut down the servers and they were going to reboot the whole thing. He even said that it's like, that day I remember being so stressful because of, there were a mere, like, I think Yoshi P even said, he's like, I don't actually remember what I did when we released. I think I just answered a bunch of emails because there were so many people that were just like asking on forums, like, what's this going to do with my character? Is my progress going to be saved? You know, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? You know, what's going to actually happen? And I remember Yoshi P being like, yeah, a lot of the players were really concerned and they started panicking. It was awesome.
It was awesome.
Like, it was hilarious.
Man is insane.
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah. And it was, he also talked about how, he did like, up until, I think it was like the day of or the day before A Realm Reborn released. He talked about how he had a story.
Oh, God,
he was he was on his way to a press conference, and oh god, my controller bugged out. He was on his way to a press conference for the release of ARR, and I guess he had he was on the subway on his way to the press conference, and he had like literally just like some random guy quietly came up to him like on the subway and kind of like in a low voice he goes, "Hello, are you Mr. Yoshida?" And you know, he was like, "Yeah, that's me." And he goes, "Oh, I just want to congratulate you on your on the release of your new game." Like, because I guess that guy, that single player, was like, he used to play 1.0. He took part in all the beta tests and all the things. And he's like, "I'm looking forward to playing it."
That's cool.
And it was very sweet and it was very touching to kind of know that there were people who still played the game, even though it was trash. And it's like, you know what? Man pulled off nothing short of a miracle. Truly.
Right.
And,
Totally.
I'll put all three of them in the link dump for people to check out, because it's really, really fascinating, actually. Like, it's super, super interesting. And I highly recommend it, especially if you like Final Fantasy in general, if you are thinking about playing 14, like, highly recommend checking it out. It's super, super cool. But yeah, and again, like, the documentary came out like in 2018, so it's like 3 years old now, I honestly never heard about it ever. And so literally I just saw like people pulling references from on Reddit, and I was like, "Oh, interesting." Yeah. And they even talked to like the CEO of like, you know, what was it like to have Yoshi P coming in and being like, "We're gonna remake our game under the same title," and they're just like, "Yeah, it was honestly like we took that chance and we hoped that it was gonna we hoped it was gonna work, because if it didn't, then we'd go bankrupt."
Exactly.
And I was just like, Jesus Christ.
Stress.
Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, TLDR, Final Fantasy is a great game, and I'm here for it, honestly.
Yeah.
That is to say that, like, Final Fantasy, I think, is a very good... Final Fantasy is a great series in general. I think it does beg the question, though, of, like, how long do you think we're gonna have... Like, how many Final Fantasies do you think we're actually gonna have? That we will
at
live
least
to see?
20?
At least... Oh, God. That sounds awesome, but it
will
also
live
sounds...
for?
Yeah, that will live through.
Yeah, probably 20.
We're already at 16, or we're going to be at 16 now.
Yeah. I think that we will get to 20.
Probably, yeah. Question. So let's say that they stopped making Final Fantasy 14, okay? Or, like, they stopped putting out expansions, but they were like, "Hey, we're making a new MMO, and you can transfer your character to that MMO." Would you pick it up?
Oh, yeah. There's no reason not to. Like, why wouldn't I?
I don't know. Like, because, I mean, you have people who play 11 who still play 11, and they are also in the same boat of, like, 11 is, like, okay, but it's also, like, just don't pay attention to the pile of hot garbage next to it.
Yeah.
Like, so, I don't know, like, it's just, like, an interesting thing of, like, I mean, obviously, I would do the same, but it is interesting to kind of think about, like, you know, with MMOs, you just sort of keep playing them, And I think it's really interesting to kind of think about, like, eventually we are going to stop playing this game. That is going to happen in one way or another. And I don't know. I'm just curious as to, like, what is that going to look like? Why would I stop playing this game? Is it because of I can't afford it? Is it because they did something that, made me mad? Or is it because, like, they made a new game and I'm like, I'll transfer over?
Or there's just no service.
Yeah, or did they shut down service? Like, it's just something that I'm, like, really curious about. Of, like, I wonder what that's gonna look like.
Mm-hmm. That would probably be it for me. I don't see myself. That's usually all it is either I've done everything and I can't justify being around anymore, but I can pay $13 a month. That's nothing for me. Yeah. It would just be, is there nothing new for like 5 to 10 years? That might be it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, like you said, I'm invested in this game, and it's really good, and I have no reason to ever stop playing it.
Yeah.
For the foreseeable future. Granted, like, I did stop playing for a little while, but I still came back.
Yeah, but you can pick it back up. It's like,
it's because I didn't get further.
Yeah. There's actually something really interesting that, again, I don't want to, like, just keep saying stuff from the documentary, but there is something that Yoshi P did say that, like, for 14, he never wanted it to be a game that you're constantly playing. Like, for him, 14 should be a game that you play when new stuff comes out, and then once you do all that stuff, put it away and go play something else.
Yeah.
And then when we put out another update, you come back and you play through that content and we repeat. And I'm like,
I am all about that.
Yeah, and that was something that really stuck with me of, like, I love that. Like, I think it's an idea that makes sense logically, but it, like, in practice, it's weird to hear,
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's such a weird idea to hear, but it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, that, I don't, like, that shouldn't sound nearly as weird as it does.
Right. I mean, that's what all these games as service games want to do.
Yeah.
But most of them can't pull it off.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I would say that is something unique that 14 kind of has, is that it's a game that's, like, you can pick up, you play all the stuff that's in there, or all the stuff that you want to play, and then after that you go play something else, and then when the patch comes out, you play it again, you repeat.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I was expecting the squares again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but yeah, so I think, but again, like I said before, I highly, highly recommend going to check out that documentary. It's a super, super fascinating. Even if you don't like Final Fantasy 14, it's super fascinating. Like, it's really, really interesting, because it is a story that you don't hear about very often. You never hear about a game doing bad and then re-releasing and then doing amazing. You just you don't hear stuff like that. And so I think it's definitely, like, a thing that's like, oh wow, this is one of those 1 in a million kind of chances. Okay, I'm not getting the minion, so that feels bad.
What did you get?
I rolled a 10.
Ooh.
I'm not winning. Which is upsetting, because it's the only one that I need.
I rolled a 79, so there's a chance. Yeah. I did not get it.
Well, feels bad. All right. Well, I think that's a pretty good way for us to end here. So, guys, I want to thank you once again for tuning into another episode of the C+ Podcast. As per usual, I will be putting up a edited version up on my YouTube next week, so stay tuned for that if you want to see kind of both of Hex and I's faces, as well as what we're doing here. But yeah, as always, though, my name is Shogun Shin, that is Hex Ginkgo, and we will see you guys next time.
Bye, everybody.